What's up, guys? Welcome to a brand new episode of the Fit Women's Weekly podcast. If this is your first time tuning in, welcome. I hope that you enjoy what you hear and you want to go back and listen to previous episodes. And of course, continue to come back for future episodes because I put out 2 new podcasts every single week. Because I simply just love coming here and connecting with you guys. I love sharing my passion for fitness. I've been a personal trainer for almost 20 years. And I also love sharing my own personal experiences, what I do in the gym, what I do outside of the gym, all the things. It's what makes us feel connected and part of a community, right? And so today we're kind of going to change things up. I don't have somebody that I'm interviewing. I'm not talking about something in the news. I am sharing with you guys the experience that my husband Dan and I had last week, and that is living our fitness out in the mountains. I've talked a lot before about how I'm a big believer in living your fitness. What exactly does that mean? That means getting outside of the gym and living life to its fullest. What's the point of being able to deadlift a certain amount of weight or squat? What's the purpose of going in and putting in all of these hours if you're not going to use that to actually live your life, right? To get out and do cool things. And for each of us, that could be something completely different. Living your fitness might mean being able to play with your kids without being in pain, right? Having the energy to be able to play with your kids. Living your fitness is as simple as being able to carry your groceries up the stairs to your house. It could be simply being able to wake up in the morning pain-free if for years you've dealt with chronic back pain. Or it could be doing really cool adventures. For Dan and I, that means a lot of trail running. It means saying yes to a lot of experiences in our past. It means kayaking, being out in the water. It means going hiking. Specifically for me, hiking and being out in the mountains is just the best. That is where I feel the most connected to the world. It is where I am the most peaceful. It's just my absolute favorite. And which is so funny because I'm from Charleston, South Carolina. So people always think that I'm like a beach person, but I'll be completely honest, as much as I do love the beach, if I were to choose between the beach and the mountains is where I feel at home. I really do. And it's so funny because I really didn't discover that about myself until my later 20s. So up until then, I considered myself a beach girl, even though my family is from Western North Carolina, like my grandparents and stuff. So I would spend summers there, but that was such a small glimpse and I wasn't really old enough or experienced enough. They didn't take me out hiking a lot to be able to find that love earlier. So up until my upper 20s, when I was nearly 30, living my fitness meant going to the beach, playing in the waves and that sort of stuff. So for today's episode, I'm going to share with you guys our adventure from last week about Mount Mitchell, which is our favorite trail. I want to explain why it's our favorite trail, and then the scariest hiking adventure that we have ever had. And we've been doing this for quite a while now. Normally I wouldn't do this as a full podcast, but I really want to use this as like a chance to educate. If maybe you're new to going out hiking, maybe you are a veteran too, and you've just never had this kind of experience. How did we handle it the right way and the wrong way? And then also the other stupid mistake that I made when hiking. So first off, again, welcome to the show. If you are not subscribed to the podcast, please make sure to do that. If you're watching this on YouTube, give this video a like and subscribe. And if you're listening to this on your favorite podcast platform and it has the opportunity to leave a review, please do that. It really does help us be able to get this podcast out in front of more people and just help spread the love that is Fit Women's Weekly. And if you haven't, speaking of Fit Women's Weekly, tried Fit Women's Weekly Live for free, you can go do that. The link is down in the show notes, as well as information on my RNA reset, which is the magnesium that I use and I absolutely love. And then there's other ways that you can help support the channel down below too. So, all right, let's jump into this episode. First, how did we come to really love this particular area? So Mount Mitchell is one of the mountains of the Black Mountain Range, which is part of the Appalachian Trail. So it is east of the Mississippi. It is actually the highest mountain east of the Mississippi, and we discovered it because first we had to find our love for hiking. My husband did not grow up as like a wildlife kind of guy. He was into the golf scene growing up, but I found trail running in my mid-20s from a friend. She was like, hey, I signed up for this trail run. Do you want to do it? I love a challenge. So I was like, yeah, sure, why not? And I think it was also around this time too that we had gotten into obstacle course racing. And so I got into trail running, and I just knew that Dan, my husband, who hates running, after that first race, I was like, this might be something that we can do together. I think that even though he hates running, this could be up his alley. So I went to him. I was like, just come try this with me. And sure enough, he really did like it. And from that, really our experience of getting out to the mountains grew. We started hiking more in upstate South Carolina and North Carolina. And I also started taking groups of women out on hikes too. That's probably one of my favorite things that I've gotten to do with my studio in Charleston and with my connections with Fit Women's Weekly, is being able to take groups of 10 or more women to live their fitness with me. But when I was about 29, I remember this number very specifically because I was getting ready to turn 30. We had heard about Mount Mitchell, highest mountain east of the Mississippi. I don't know how we had learned about it, but Dan was like, I think this would be really cool for us to go and hike. So actually on my 30th birthday, we went and did it. One of the toughest trails to this day that we've ever done. What I will say is I understand that, people out west make fun of the mountains here on our side because they're not huge, right? We don't have 14ers. Literally our highest mountain is Mount Mitchell. It is 6,684 feet tall. However, what we lack in height, we gain in intensity of our trails. Instead of having really long switchbacks, basically whoever creates the trails decides that obviously the shortest distance between 2 points is a straight line. And that is how they create most of our trails. They are very hard, very intense, and lots of climbing. So we did that first Mount Mitchell trail. We loved the whole experience. We actually really got to know a lot of people in the area. It starts at the Black Mountain Campground, and then it finishes up at the summit. Now, the one thing that I will say, y'all, about Mount Mitchell hike, and I am using this as a sales opportunity, because if you are anywhere near Mount Mitchell, if you are anywhere near Western North Carolina, if you're in South Carolina, Georgia, Tennessee, and you have not hiked this, you have to do it. But I laugh because you work so hard, and I'll go through the stages of the hike here in just a second. But when you get to the top, it's off of the Parkway, the Blue Ridge Parkway, which you can drive. It's absolutely stunning. And so you can actually park your car and walk to the lookout tower. So it's so funny because you've spent hours hiking to the top, and then all of a sudden it clears out. There's a concession stand, there's campgrounds, there's a parking lot, and there's a walkway to the actual lookout tower. So it's really, really funny when people are like, oh yeah, I've been there. And you always have to ask, like, did you hike it or did you park and take the lookout? Either way, you have to go experience it however you feel comfortable for. So since then, in that first hike, when we fell in love with it, I have now done that hike so many times. We decided to do what's called the Quest for the Crest, which is a very intense 50K trail race. We've participated in that 2 times. I will say participated because Dan finished it once. I actually did not make the time cap, so I technically did not finish it, but I say that I finished it because I got the miles done. I just didn't meet the time requirement. And then the second year, both of us had to drop out. I had some electrolyte issues. It's basically you're going up and down the mountain. So anyway, so we've done it through the trail race. And then I've taken a group, I believe, of 3 camp groups to hike it. And then I myself and Dan have hiked it probably close to 4 or 5 times outside of that, doing backcountry camping on it, and then also just doing a cabin rental and hiking it throughout the day. So yeah, this is a place that is very near and dear to our heart. When I think about living my fitness and the best experiences that I have, it goes back to Mount Mitchell. So anyways, that's a little bit of the history. Now let's fast forward to this time around. I want to take you guys through a little bit of the hike and what makes it so special, and then share what happened on our hike that really scared the bejesus out of us. It's a thing that all hikers fear. Not often does it actually come into be, but it did for us this time around. So this year I turned 40, and Dan and I have not actually been hiking since 2019, just because life has been busy, unfortunately. You know how it can get. With 2020, it was insane, and then Dan went back into the workforce, and there's been a lot of changes with our business, so we just haven't had a vacation for the two of us. And finally this year we're in a much more comfortable place, and he had some vacation time, and I said, this year we're going on a trip. And we decided to stick around this part of town just because, again, life is busy, or this side of the country versus taking a flight somewhere. And so for us, Mount Mitchell is about a 5-hour drive to us. And I said, let's go. We did it for my 30th birthday. It only makes sense that we go back this time around when I'm turning 40 and just be together. We rented a cabin. We are not going to do backcountry camping this go around. And that's exactly what we did. We got ourselves up there. Now on the way up, we had been warned that bears are very popular right now. There's been a lot of black bear sightings. In fact, one of my best friends was out in Asheville last week, and she saw one near where she was staying, and even sent a picture. So we had talked about it with my group of girlfriends of just be careful, maybe take some bear spray with you. And we did not, spoiler, take bear spray with us. But on the drive up, I was telling Dan about this, and we were just kind of casually talking about it. And it was so funny because literally 5 minutes later, we were winding through the back country because we had stopped at Sierra Nevada for a beer. We always do, kind of as pit stop before we head up the mountain, which if you are a Sierra Nevada fan, you should absolutely. It's in a small town called Mills River. It's right near the Asheville airport. Such a beautiful place. The brewery in itself, and they have a really great selection on tap as well. So we had a beer, chit-chatted a little bit, and we were making the drive the back way up to where our cabin was. And we had just talked about black bears, and all of a sudden I was like, oh my gosh, look over there. Y'all, there was a huge, at least 6-foot black bear just walking through someone's front yard. It was insane. So we were like, okay, that's kind of creepy, right? That's a little scary. But we were in our car. It was fine. And so we make it to the cabin and we start planning out what are we going to be doing for the rest of our days. We had 3 days that we could hike. Now, also keep in mind, Dan works out just to maintain his fitness right now. He's not really working towards any goals. And then obviously I'm leading Fit Women's Weekly Live. So I definitely have the upper hand when it comes to fitness. So I was like, what do you want to do? What do you feel comfortable with? And he was like, well, I don't want to just jump right out of it and go right to Mount Mitchell tomorrow, because going all the way up it and all the way down it, it's about a 6-hour trip. It can be. It's a 5.5 to 6 mile climb, and just one direction. So we were talking about 10 to 12 miles round trip, and that can be really intense. So he wanted something to help warm his body up, just kind of get into the right mindset. And he was like, we haven't done a trail called Green Knob in quite a while. In fact, again, this was a trail that we did on my 30th birthday weekend before we hiked Mount Mitchell, basically for the same reasons. And someone had just mentioned it to us, but it's not really a very popular trail. Sadly, it should be, but it is a very intense trail. So Green Knob, you park at the same place that you would park if you were going to do Mount Mitchell, but it's on the opposite side of the road. So instead, just putting it out there, instead of walking through the campgrounds to get to the Mount Mitchell trail, you just park your car and the trailhead is directly in front of you in the actual parking lot. So we were like, okay, let's do that. Now, just if you're interested, I'm not going to talk too much about Green Knob. All I will say is that it is an intense trail. It's a 5.5 mile round trip. Well, I would say it's a little bit more than that. It's 3 miles up, 3 miles down. So about 6 mile round trip. And then in the up, going to the top, it's an elevation gain of 2,437 feet. That's exhausting. There are some parts where you might need to bear crawl. We have in the past. This time I was like, hey, I can tell I'm a little bit fitter because I never had to use my hands to get up the incline. But it is very, very tough. But there's some really beautiful lookouts, and at the very, very top of the Green Knob, there's an old fire station lookout. Well, not fire station, but fire lookout, where you like can climb up it, and there's like a little, cabin thing at the top. That's always blocked off, but you can still go up the stairs and just kind of chill. It's important to the story. So we got up the first day, and our cabin was actually on the main road towards where all of this stuff is. So instead of worrying about parking and everything, we just walked. It was about 3/4 probably of a mile from our cabin. So we walked to the head of the trail, to the trailhead, and start making our way up. There's not a lot of people, which is also important to the story, because again, the Green Knob is a beautiful trail I recommend, but it's just not as popular as the Mount Mitchell Trail. So we start going up, and maybe about a mile, we hear something in the woods, something big. This was not a squirrel. This was not a chipmunk. We were like, okay, was that a deer? Was that a bear? We didn't know at that point. And so we just kind of made ourselves on high alert to pay attention to everything going around, which always, you should not hike in the woods with earphones in. So that's a very important piece of information that I want to pass on. We never hike with earphones on. We make sure that we're able to hear everything around us. So we're just on high aware, right? High alert. So we continue up, and maybe about another mile, so about the mile 2 mark, we stop at this great overlook, and we're looking out, and all of a sudden we hear this sound that sounds kind of like a roar. Kind of a scary roar, right? And Dan immediately went, "Did you hear that? What was that?" And at first I was like, yeah, I did hear that. But then I could also hear cars in the distance. So it's so funny when you're on these trails in the middle of nowhere, because the parkways and stuff are still kind of close by, so that if you're really listening, you can hear cars in the distance. It just doesn't feel like it. You feel like there's no one around you, that there's no civilization, but there kind of is. So I could hear cars in the distance. So I put it off as like, oh, I heard that, but it could have sounded like a car starting up. And Dan was like, I don't know about that. I was like, no, you can hear the cars going. I think that's what it was. So we kind of take a couple of deep breaths. And again, we just maintain high alert. And then with some time, we're like, okay, maybe that's what it was. So the fear goes away. We continue up our hike. We finish. We get up to the summit of Green Knob. And up at the very summit, like I said, there's a fire lookout, but there's also maybe about 50 yards away, not even, probably 100 feet, there is a campsite, but you have to go on like a little side trail. I just know it's there from previous hikes. This was I think my 4th time doing this particular hike. So we didn't go on that side trail to go to a campsite, but I just know that it's there. So we go up the stairs, the fire lookout. We sit up at the very top, and we start to have our snack. I posted this picture. I'll make sure to put it here for those of you guys looking on YouTube. We were just chilling. It was a beautiful day. We were able to look out. And so all of a sudden, after I took that picture, I'm eating an apple I picked up from a farm stand nearby where we were staying, and all was fine. All of a sudden, I feel the hair on my arm stand up. My body reacted in a very animalistic way, that fight or flight feeling. And I heard that same roar that we had heard earlier, but it was very, very close, very loud, and very distinct. There was no question about it that this was an animal roar. And Dan was talking when I heard it, and I said, "Did you hear that?" And he was like, "No," but he could tell that I was not messing around. My face was white, and I had that instant fear. And I said, "Dan, I heard the roar, and it was very loud, and it was right there." And I pointed. And when I did that, there's a clearing where the lookout tower is, but other than that, it's all tall shrubs that you would find at the top of a mountain. And I pointed over, and you could see the top of the shrubs moving, that there was clearly something very big right there about 50 feet away from us. It was very, very close. And immediately we started to do what you should do if you come in contact with a black bear, and that is making yourself known, making sure that you seem very big, very loud. You don't want to startle it, but you want them to know that you are there. So we start singing or saying go away, bear, go away, or clapping our hands. I had a whistle, I was whistling. And we sat there just talking, scared out. Like, it was a very scary moment. We were on these stairs at least, so at least it gave us like a headshot of what was around us. Whereas I feel like if I had been on the ground, it would have been even scarier. But here's where one of the mistakes is that we made, that we did not have bear spray with us. I did not have bear spray, but we did have knives. We carry hiking knives with us, so we did take that out. But my advice is carry bear spray if you know that you're in a highly bear populated area. Better safe than sorry. But other than that, we did the right things. We made lots of noise. We did have the gear that we had it accessible to us. And we sat there for a good 10 to 15 minutes while this continued, basically feeling like we were not being circled, but whatever was there, that bear, Dan will say, like, we don't really know if it was bear. The people that we talked to that are running the area, we did talk to some of the people that like run the campground down below. It was a bear. We're pretty confident in that. He sat around for a good 10 to 15 minutes just knowing we were there. But what I think happened is, one, we were carrying some snacks with us. We had Laura bars, which were packaged, but I had my apple with me. So I don't know if maybe that fresh apple at the bottom of the trail had given off some scent and he was kind of like following us along with it. That would be my only, like, that was really the only thing that could have been giving smells, because everything else was like pre-packaged snack bars that were still packaged up. So I don't think those were like really giving off scents until we opened them up at the top. And then I think the other thing is people's stupidity. They were talking about this when we were talking to the wildlife guys down at the bottom of the trailhead, that people were being really reckless with cleaning up after themselves at campsites. And there were a lot of, unfortunately, homeless people that had now taken on to living on some of these trails. So even though I did not go by that hiking or the campground site, I have a feeling that there was probably some food left that bear was staking for his own, and maybe saw us there as a threat of trying to get to it ourselves. So anyways, during all of this, I still had my apple in my hand, and I try not to, we always try to leave a trail cleaner than when we left it. If we see trash, you pick it up. But I had this apple and I was like, Dan, what should I do? Like, normally I would take the rind and stuff down with us, even though it's an apple. Do you think, like, should we throw this? And finally, when the bear still had not left us, I handed it to him. I was like, please throw this as far as you can off the side of this mountain. Because, I mean, it is a very steep mountain. If you threw it, it's going to go farther than you expected. I was like, I don't want any sense of anything around me. So he did throw it off. And then we waited probably another 5 minutes, and we noticed that the leaves had stopped moving, that whatever it was no longer, at least right there. And we took that as our opportunity to get off that mountain, and we hiked it down as quickly as we can. Now, another tip, if you ever find yourself in this situation, never start running, because if you start running, a black bear can see that, or any type of bear or predator can see that as a chase opportunity, right? So you just want to make sure that you're moving swiftly, you're moving with purpose, but you're also being aware still of what's going on around you, and you're not trying to like speed off and go into a run. And that's exactly what we did. So overall, I'm really proud of the way that we handled the situation. I only wish that we had had bear spray with us, but lesson learned. You live, you learn, and luckily we had an opportunity to live and learn again. But I do know that there's a lot of stuff going around about black bear, so I just thought that I would list a couple little fun facts to almost put your mind at ease. I know that it helped put my mind at ease, and that is that there are over 750,000 total black bears in North America. That is crazy. North Carolina, in fact, has, I believe, the eighth highest population in the United States, with over 20,000 black bears. But here's the thing. Black bears account for, there's on average about one attack per year. And most often it's because humans either sneak up on them and they feel threatened, Or they're approaching a mom with cubs and they're like, oh, look at the cute cubs. And of course the mom is going to act in a defensive way. So black bears in and of themselves actually get spooked most often than not and will run away. It's just important that you never walk up on them, especially if they're eating and you surprise them or startle them, or if you see a mom with her cubs, which we learned that her cubs stay with her for a full year. Let them have their life. And you should be good. In fact, since 1784, not 1984, since 1784, there's only been 66 fatal attacks. Now, obviously 66 attacks is still an attack, but we're talking, 250 years for 66 attacks? That's really minimal. So I think that it's important to you're justified in being scared, but it's really important to be smart. And I don't ever want someone to be afraid of going out and living their fitness or trying to go hiking or trail run out of fear of running into a black bear, because the chances are high, with as many as there are, that at some point you will see one. But if you are smart about it and you know how to handle the situation, you should be just totally fine. For me personally, this was just a reminder, and Dan and I were talking about this, that we are guests in their environment. These woods and these trails are a gift to us. That is not something that I am expected to be able to do. That is not my territory. That is not my property. And so that just makes me even more grateful that I get to be out there. And if you treat it with respect, you should be fine. Now, on the way down, not to say, probably about every 2 minutes, I would look over my shoulder to make sure that everything was fine, that there's nothing coming down behind the trail with us. The only little snafu that we had coming down was that there are yellow jacket holes in the ground. And normally, again, it's fine, but every once in a while, if you step on it just right or just hard enough, you'll disturb the nest. And I think that just in our frenzy to try to get out, Dan hit the yellow jacket nest just right. And I ended up getting stung by my ankle, I think by 2, right on the Achilles by 1 and on the side. It immediately hurt like a mother effer. I was like, oh my God, this hurt so bad. But I didn't have time to think about it. It was more of just get down the mountain, right? And it really wasn't, I'm just saying this because if you've ever been stung by a yellow jacket, let me know if this has been your scenario. It stung immediately. It hurt really bad. But after about 10 to 15 minutes, that pain kind of went away. And then it was fine the rest of the day. I did go home immediately and I put my foot into our creek that was behind our house just to get some cold water on my feet for my plantar fasciitis, but also to help with that, the sting. But then the next day I noticed it was starting to itch a little bit. It was starting to get a little bit swollen. And then about 36 hours later, it was really swollen. The swelling kind of came to a maximum. And then since then, I'm now 6 days after the sting. It's still a little swollen. It is finally going down, but the itch is still there, y'all. It is crazy. And because it was right on the Achilles, it is definitely uncomfortable. There's still a lot of tenderness in that area. I just wasn't expecting a freaking yellow jacket sting to bother me for a full week, but I guess that's just how it is. That was really the biggest snafu. We did make it down. We saw one trail runner. He was coming up as we were going down. We warned him about what was going on. He didn't seem worried about it at all. He was like, thanks for the warning. That's cool. Hopefully he was A-okay. And then we talked to the people at the trailhead that run the campground. And they had said yeah, we've actually seen a couple of black bears ourselves. We trapped them. But then they let them go. And actually we discovered at that time as well that there's a campground at the very top of Mount Mitchell, and it's been closed this summer because of freaking black bears getting into people's food. So that was interesting, and it kind of made us a little bit nervous for hiking Mount Mitchell the following day. But the guy was like, you'll be fine. Do everything that you did today. You're smart, you'll be good. And luckily for the Mount Mitchell hike, we did not have any strange encounters. But that was after a decade of hiking. And again, I've been on these trails in this area at least a dozen times. That was our first really scary experience. So just word to the wise, don't let that fear keep you. Just be smart about it. Make sure that you have the right equipment. Make sure that you are loud. Make sure that you hold yourself as if you are bigger than you are. Don't shrink down if you ever come into contact with a bear, and make sure that you have that bear spray. Do not make eye contact with a black bear, because then that's again putting them in like a fight or flight themselves, in which case they are going to fight because that's their predatorial animal, not a prey animal. And then also make sure that you're not going to run, which I actually discovered that it's very hard to run when your adrenaline is so high and you're in that experience or in that situation. But all worked out really well. And then the next day we did get up, we did Mount Mitchell. And I've already made this podcast 30 minutes, so I don't want to go too long. But like I mentioned, Mount Mitchell in and of itself has such a dear place in my heart, because it really did help both Dan and I discover our love of the mountains. And it's the reason now that we want to move out west to see even bigger mountains. It's our dream to be in Colorado in the next couple of years. And I can really thank Mount Mitchell for that. It's just such a beautiful place, and it makes you so in awe of what this world has to offer. And the great thing about Mount Mitchell is that it's just high enough, right? 6,684 feet, that you go through different ecosystems almost. So when you start out at the bottom, it's your typical, if you've ever been to the Appalachian Mountains, it looks like your Appalachian Mountains. It's very dry. All of the plants are like wild rhododendrons and evergreens, but not like Christmas tree evergreens. It's hard to explain. I don't know the type of their names, but it's your classic, what every mountain looks like in Western North Carolina. And then as you go up a little bit more, when you're about the midway point, all of a sudden it changes. You can feel the atmosphere change around you. It gets a little bit cooler, and then you start to look around and the ground itself has changed. It's a little bit softer. It's a little bit more covered in like pine needles. And when you look around and you take a big deep breath in, all of a sudden you're in the evergreen section of Christmas trees. It's like Fraser firs all around you, and it smells like Christmas. It's absolutely stunning. And then as you go through the next part, it's going to get a little bit more rockier. It's a little bit steeper for the last about mile and a half. And Dan calls this the Lord of the Rings sections, because all of a sudden the Christmas tree part stops, and in its place, everything is covered in this beautiful moss. It's very green, very luscious. The trees are covered in moss. The ground is covered in moss. There's more berries around. It's absolutely stunning. And again, it feels like a completely different world than you were in just an hour previously. I can't describe it, but if you're ever in that area, you really do have to climb it. Over the course of the 5.5 to 6 miles up, it's a 3,500 foot elevation, so change. So you're climbing 3,500 feet over those miles, making it a very, very steep climb. There's a lot of man-made stairs up at the very top and up at the very bottom, but in the middle part, it is very rocky. You're climbing over rocks, you're having to go over logs, you're having to go over a lot of tree roots. So that just to say that you really need strong ankles for this hike, for going up and for coming down. But if you're up for it, you got to do it. And then when you get up to the very, very top, all of a sudden there's a sidewalk, and you walk up to the summit and you get to look out, and there's all these maps so that you can see what all the other summits are around you. And then the trails continue from there. Normally what we've done in the past is you can also take the ridge line and cross over some of the other big mountains. There's Mount Craigie, which is the second highest mountain east of the Mississippi, right beside it. And then it just continues. There's Mount Silo, there's Big Tom, and then there's also some other connecting mountain trails like the Colbert's Ridge, which is a very, very hard but very cool hike. And then the next one, I'm just going off of memory here, the next one would be Woody Ridge, which is one of the most intense vertical climbs in North Carolina. One of our favorites. We were going to do that on the following day, but turns out Dan was a little bit too sore after doing our 2 back-to-back hikes. Totally get that. It was fine. My foot deserved the rest as well. And then after Woody Ridge, there's Boland's Creek. Now, if you guys are like, wow, you really know this area. Yeah, it's mostly from doing all the trail runs, because when we do the trail runs, we have to hike up and down all of these for the Quest for the Crest. But you can make it an entire weekend of just hiking all of these fun, tough trails. So that was our experience. And it was really bittersweet, because we do have the goal to get out west shortly. within the next, like I said, this isn't tomorrow, but in the next couple of years. And so Dan and I kind of made the decision that this is probably our last trip out to that area. And so we really got to end it on, I feel like, a really cool note. We had our it was an adventure. We had our scary moments of that adrenaline, but we really had some beautiful moments as well. We got to talk to some really cool people in town. It's such a friendly town. And yeah, bittersweet, because I just so grateful that we found this area, because I don't hear a lot of people in South Carolina talking about it. In fact, when I tell people where we're going hiking, I'm like, yeah, we're going to go climb Mount Mitchell. They're like, what? What's that? Which is such a shame, because it's the biggest mountain that we have over here. So that was our experience. I got stung, kind of got chased by a bear. I'm glad that we did not actually see it, but it was enough to make us learn our lesson in moving forward and becoming smarter hikers as we go forward. Oh, and then the other mistake that I made, I will say this as well, is that I did not have enough water with me when we hike. I normally try to carry at least a liter of water, but again, because Mount Mitchell has that lookout tower at the top, there's a water fountain up there. So I was like, well, I'm just going to take a 500 milliliter water bottle, and then I can always fill it up at the very top. Plus, Dan had his bladder, so I knew if I needed some, I could drink it from his bladder as well. But when we got up to the very top, the water fountains were still off from 2020 when they turned them off. And apparently it's because the pipes from being shut off got really dirty and really rusty. So when they tried to turn them back on, the water was just not clean. So they turned them off again, and they haven't repaired it yet, which just sucks. So lesson number 2 is don't rely on external things like water. Just expect that it's not going to become available, and make sure that you have enough for yourself. And then when we got to the very bottom, where there normally is a water fountain as well, that was turned off too. So I did end up having to drink Dan's water. And I think it took us we had about 2 liters all together that we both went through. So we had about a liter of water each. Normally I would suggest a liter to a liter and a half. As far as how long does it take to do the Mount Mitchell hike, generally people say it takes about, well, let me see. Let me see if I can see Mount Mitchell Trail. According to All Trails, it takes around 7 hours and 7 minutes to do it. It took us 3 hours to get up. We started at 10 a.m. and got up right at 1. And then we were down by about 3:10. So it took us about 5 hours. That is not the fastest that we've ever done it in, but that is a pretty good clip time. According to All Trails, it takes about 7 hours and 7 minutes. And on here, it has that the elevation gain is 3,690 feet. That's crazy. Over a total distance of 11.2 miles. So like I said, it's more than 5.5 miles, which is what they have on like the trail signs, but it is more, and it's hard. And then on the green knob, it's estimated at 4 hours and 9 minutes. It took us 3 hours, and it's a total distance of 5.5 miles up and back for an elevation gain of 2,437 feet over that time just going up. So half of it's up, half of it's just coming back down. So there you go. If you guys have any questions, I would love to hear from it. If you want me to do more series on some of the hikes or the trail runs that we've done in the past, I'm happy to do that. I will just go ahead and specify that most of the trails that we have done are the ones in upstate South Carolina, Jones Gap, Looking Glass, or Table Rock, those are our favorite, Pinnacle, and then Western North Carolina. We've also done Nantahala, some trails because of trail racing. We've done, I've done Mount LeConte, which is beautiful with some of my ladies. I've done Grandfather Mountain. I've done Art Lobe. And I'm sure there's some more. So if you have questions, let me know. I'll happy to answer them. And we can talk when we're backcountry. I don't know if I've ever shared our experience of doing backcountry hiking before. We've only done it twice. Or one time we got really freaked out, and the second time was better, but I think the second time was when I'll have to save that for another podcast. All right, guys, make sure to like the video, subscribe, and again, if you have any questions, let me know. And if you haven't already, check out Fit Women's Weekly Live, my online streaming service where I go live with a brand new workout Monday through Friday. You can try it out for free. Come connect with me. If you can't make it live, it's okay. Every workout is available for you so that when you are able to work out, you can hit play, be transported back to time when I was live, and still do it with me. Links down below, as well as, like I said, for my RNA reset, which is the magnesium and the mineral mix that I drink every single day. You can use code FWW to get a discount, and that helps to support the channel. All right, you guys, thanks. Bye.